What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the DFS Dose YouTube channel. I'm Ben Harvard, joined as I always am by Joey Carrion. Look, first things first, I'm going to need you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. That's the first thing we got to do. Secondly, let's get into the video. Let's just keep it going. On our last podcast, episode 132, which you can find on Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, Podcast Addict, wherever you want, we had James Brimacombe, one of the highest volume best ball drafters out there, join the show, talk about some free agency news. You know, we covered the first wave of guys, the New England spending spree, Corey Davis, Fitzmagic, Jameis, Taysom, Aaron Jones, etc. So you can get all our takes for that on the podcast. But since we recorded, there have been a ton of signings. You know, the news is pumping out. Players are finding their new homes, and we're going to hit on some of that right here, right now. Joey, I don't know how you feel about it. The way I feel about it is that most of these landing spots are just pure ass. Like, they're absolute cheeks. Like, I'm baffled by them. I'm tilted by it. I don't know. Where do you want to start here?
I guess we can start with one of your guys, JuJu.
Yeah.
Decided to return to Pittsburgh on a 1-year, $8 million contract. Turned down offers from other teams such as the Chiefs, the Eagles, the Ravens, to go back to Pittsburgh to play with Big Ben, who is kind of withered at this point in his career. I don't understand it. I will say that the landings, like him going back to Pittsburgh, is whatever. He wasn't great in fantasy last year, but he did finish as the wide receiver 16. Hasn't been over 1,000 yards though in 2 years now. I don't know. I just think it's a very low upside situation in Pittsburgh with JuJu SmithSchuster.
Yeah, I feel that. Kind of pumps the brakes on the hype for the Deontay Johnson breakout campaign, right? Same thing with the Chase Claypool breakout campaign. JuJu being there kind of puts that at least a year on hold, maybe longer if he ends up signing another deal. So it was only a 1-year deal, maybe coming off of a season that he didn't feel like was his best season, thinks he can come back, already has chemistry with Big Ben, and can earn a bigger payday next year in a situation he's already comfortable in. I don't know. I don't love it. There's 3 really solid wide receivers there. I was kind of hoping JuJu would find a place where he could carve out a more meaningful target share for himself. I don't think that is with the Steelers. I expect him to still be productive though, especially in PPR. If you're telling me that JuJu is going to stay at an ADP where he is, going at least 2 rounds behind Deontay, a round behind Claypool, he's going to be my favorite target in this wide receiver group just based off price.
Yeah, so he's being drafted as the Pittsburgh wide receiver 3, when in reality, he'll probably finish the season as the wide receiver 1, just like he did this year. Now, I do expect Deontay and Claypool to be more productive this year. They were productive in 2020, but their breakouts should continue into 2021. But I think JuJu is Big Ben's safety blanket, especially when you have Deontay dropping passes and then they like rotate that third wide receiver spot. So JuJu, he's going to be on the field every down and he's going to rack up a lot of catches, although they're going to be a lot of low A-dot catches that aren't too valuable in fantasy. And he didn't really have any spike weeks. Like, he didn't even have a game over 100 yards receiving last year, which is kind of not good for best ball. So I don't know if I would still pick JuJu. I think I would rather have Deontay or Claypool just for their upside. But either way, I'm kind of indifferent on JuJu. I don't know. I think he's just a beta, and I'm staying away from those guys. So
how could he be a beta when he chooses loyalty over money? That's what I want to know.
Nah. Nah.
He always said nah. The last thing I'll say about JuJu is that I think that the popular narrative is that he doesn't have upside. I don't understand that. He finished as the wide receiver 4 in his sophomore season in the same offense. I know that, it's a different group of guys now and Big Ben's in a different group, but that upside is something that most of these wide receivers that we're going to be taking above JuJu have never shown. I don't know. I think that JuJu does have some untapped upside. He's stupid young. He can get there. That's my personal take on it. But
yeah, I don't think he can get there with the Steelers in 2021, like just with their offensive situation. The team in general has, been on a decline over the last 2 years. Big Ben obviously injured 2 years ago. So, yeah, I'm staying away from JuJu.
That's fair. You know, while we're talking about low A dot wide receivers, Curtis Samuel to Washington, he got a 3-year deal, $24.5 million guaranteed. A lot of people were bullish on Curtis Samuel. I don't know. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think it was a solid signing for Washington. Curtis Samuel steps in as their wide receiver 2 behind Terry McLaurin. They were former teammates at Ohio State, so shout out to them. But I think Curtis Samuel is a good wide receiver, and if Fitzpatrick starts the season, which I expect him to, and say he plays the majority of the season, I think Curtis Samuel has a lot of upside. I don't think he's just a low A dot guy. I think he's one of the most versatile wide receivers in the NFL. He's a deep threat. He has that elite speed that you look for in a deep threat. He can also get there on those low A dot catches by turning them into long yard after the catch play. So I like Curtis. I like the landing spot for him. This Washington team should be really good. And like James mentioned, it might be the best team in the NFC East. So if Fitzpatrick can elevate these guys in terms of fantasy production, I like Curtis. I like Terry McLaurin for this year.
You think there's any merit to us just sort of slowing down on this Ryan Fitzpatrick hype train? Because I see a lot of people saying, all right, Washington is now this sleeper team. They've got Terry, they've got Curtis, they've got Gibson, they've got Fitzmagic. But in the same way, I've even talked about it on the podcast, like Fitz might play 4 games and get benched. Like that's very much in the realm of outcome. This could be where he plays 6 games and Heineke plays the rest. Like, I think that there's a good chance that this offense is not all that. I think Curtis Samuel's a great real life signing. Like he clearly, bolsters the Washington team, but I don't know if all these guys are going to be able to get there in fantasy. I trust Terry McLaurin. I trust Antonio Gibson, and that's about the extent of my trust in Washington at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think Fitz could get Curtis Samuel there, but like you said, he's not a lock to start the whole season. So it's kind of like a if-then situation. If Fitzpatrick starts the whole year, then Curtis Samuel and Terry McLaurin are solid fantasy picks this year. If he doesn't, then I would probably stay away from Curtis Samuel at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll have to see where his ADP settles in after this news. How about the Raiders backfield? The Raiders have been making some highly questionable, decisions with free agency, cutting their offensive line. They signed Kenyan Drake, re-signed Theo Riddick. I don't know. Yeah. This to me shows a lack of trust in Josh Jacobs, and I think it kind of tanks the value of both of these guys, Kenyan Drake and Josh Jacobs. I'm not bullish on either at this point.
Yeah, I'm probably not drafting either of those guys. I think Josh Jacobs is a talented running back in the NFL, but obviously their signings and re-signings put a damper on his fantasy upside. He'll probably be a 2-down grinder, maybe a 1-down grinder with Kenyan Drake there. They'll probably split 50-50 if I'm assuming, but I don't know if it's because they don't trust him. They did draft him in the first round. I think it's just because Mike Mayock and John Gruden are idiots and kind of don't know how to run a team. Mm-hmm. Like you said, they released their O-line too, traded some of them as well. So not too high on Kenyan Drake, not too high on Josh Jacobs, avoiding them in fantasy football. It's pretty much my stance on it.
Yeah, I don't know where Josh Jacobs' ADP will settle in. He was in the 3rd round going around guys like, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Miles Sanders, Najee Harris. I think he's solidly below that tier at this point. I think he gets knocked down quite a bit.
His ADP will probably finish in the 7th round, maybe.
That sounds about right. And I think him and Drake should be going both in that range, honestly. Yeah. I mean, there's upside if one gets hurt, from a best ball perspective. So I wouldn't mind taking them as flyers, but I think, I don't know. I don't trust them as safe options. And while we're talking about messy backfields, Houston, this is getting ugly and uglier by the day. They already had David Johnson. Then they bring in Mark Ingram on a 1-year deal. They bring in Phillip Lindsay on a 1-year deal. Ingram and Lindsay are both getting paid about $3 million each. So I don't, the contracts don't really say where they value these 2 guys. I mean, it might be a situation where it's just avoid all 3.
Yeah, I'm definitely not targeting any Houston Texans running back, especially with the Deshaun Watson situation and everything that he's going through. So, God, who knows if he even plays in 21, and he probably wouldn't have played in Houston to begin with, which is going to just make that offense terrible. That would make Tyrod the starter. So just a stay away situation for me. I don't even see any upside with any three of these guys, even if they were the singular running back in the backfield. So
Yeah.
I'm staying away from Lindsey. Mark Ingram, he's irrelevant. He's dust. David Johnson is dust at this point. So they're just going to do a hot hand approach, and that's not good for fantasy. So staying away from that.
They also signed Dante Moncrief. Like, what are they doing?
I
really don't understand.
They're literally signing every free agent possible,
but none of the good ones. Interesting. How about Chris Carson? That's your longtime boy. He ends up staying in Seattle, 2-year deal worth about $14.6 million. You know, this isn't a bad spot. The Russell Wilson situation is kind of like a dark cloud over all of Seattle right now. He kind of wants out. I don't know, but as long as he's there, this should be a high-powered offense. And I think Chris, this is a good spot for Chris Carson. It's probably better than going to the Patriots and being, there with White and Damian Harris or whoever they've got at that point, Sony Michel. I think this is a good spot for Chris Carson. He averaged between 14.4 and 15.7 fantasy points per game over the last 3 years in Seattle, and he'll probably be in that range again.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Carson, I think he's a solid running back in the NFL. In his 4 years with the Seahawks, he's gone over 1,000 yards twice in 2019 and 2018. Kind of had a bad year last year, finished as the RB19, only 681 yards on the ground. But I think on a Seahawks offense that wants to clearly establish the run, after they let Russ cook for a couple weeks and then they just completely switched their philosophy after he threw a couple interceptions. Chris Carson is the guy there. R.I.P. Rashad Penny. It was fun while it lasted.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I just think Chris Carson is going to be a solid pick. Where is he going in, like the 4th, 5th round?
Yeah. I mean, I think he might rise to like 5th round status. He was going even a little bit later than that in some points because of the uncertainty. So, I mean, Chris Carson in the 5th.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Yeah. I mean, he had 37 catches last year, 37 catches in 2019. So he does have some reception upside. And then you're getting a touchdown back in him as well. So I like him a lot. I think the Seahawks is probably one of the best landing spots for a guy like Chris Carson. So him returning there, I think, gives him the most fantasy potential.
Yeah, and we already know he has a coach that absolutely loves him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
going to use him.
Absolutely. Yeah. This one was a little surprising to me. Allen Robinson, speaking of players that are staying with their teams, signed the franchise tag. I mean, as early as Tuesday this week, we were talking about, are we in store for a long holdout? Does he want to do this? They signed Andy Dalton, the hopes of Allen Robinson playing with an elite quarterback. Again, we got to postpone that another year. $18 million franchise tag to stay in Chicago and be Andy Dalton's clear-cut number one. What do you think about what does it do for his fantasy outlook?
I mean, it obviously doesn't improve it. I don't know if it hurts it necessarily because he's gotten there with terrible quarterbacks in his career. Now, I will say Andy Dalton is probably the best quarterback that he's had so far.
That's sad.
And Andy Dalton did say that the Bears basically promised him the starting quarterback position when signing to Chicago. So in terms of how that affects Allen Robinson, obviously, like I just said, it doesn't improve it. And he finished as the wide receiver 9 in PPR last year. And that was with a combination of Mitch and Nick Foles. I still think he is a clear-cut top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. I think he's a fantasy wide receiver 1. I would probably rank him around like wide receiver 12, though. I want to draft him at wide receiver 9. But I don't know. It's just terrible for him and terrible for the Chicago Bears. Like, they just can't get a quarterback.
No, they can't. At least it's only a 1-year deal, and he'll be a free agent once again next year. 1-year deals. Will Fuller. This one I actually like quite a bit. Goes to Miami, $10 million, 1-year kind of prove it deal. There's some incentives in his contract. He could make up to like 13.6. I think it's worth noting that he still has to finish his PED suspension from last year, so he's not actually viable to start for the Dolphins until week 2. So, I mean, it's only 1 week, not a big deal. None of us who are drafting Will Fuller expect him to play a full season anyway, so it doesn't really change anything. But, Will Fuller, throughout his whole time in Houston, was more impactful for Deshaun Watson's value than even DeAndre Hopkins was. The way that the splits are when Will Fuller's playing, it just boosts the offense. It boosts Watson's efficiency and his explosiveness. And I think that, this sets up so well for Tua. Everyone's all hype about, stacking this Washington team. I'm excited about stacking Miami, Tua, Gesicki, Parker, Fuller. I love this whole situation.
Yeah, I love it as well. I mean, it's a great signing for the Dolphins. They get a player that is, I think, actually a good wide receiver. And then if we're just talking about how it helps the Dolphins offense, obviously having that deep threat to take away the safeties, to open up the field for everybody else is just a perfect situation for Tua and the rest of the skill position guys in Miami. And I think it's just more so betting on a bounce back from Tua, because obviously he was drafted as a top 5 pick, and I think he has the potential to be a great quarterback in the NFL. We didn't see it last year, and a lot of people are already calling him a bust, but a lot of things went wrong for him. He was coming back from his hip injury. Obviously no offseason last year, no training camp, no preseason games, and then combine that with the fact that him and Fitzpatrick were consistently like switching starts every other week, and he was coming in for Tua in the fourth quarter. I think that affected his game a little bit, and then combine that also with the Dolphins' injuries last year. We didn't see Tua's full potential, and I think with a healthy Dolphins skill position group this year, and the addition of Will Fuller, Tua is a prime bounce back candidate, and that should bode well for Will Fuller, Devontae Parker, Preston Williams, Mike Gesicki. And yeah, I like this spot for Will Fuller. But I don't know if he'll have great individual success, but I will say that Tua did show a willingness to throw the ball down the field last year, although he really didn't complete many of those passes.
No, he didn't. But looking at the numbers, he was actually throwing deep more than Fitzpatrick was, which I think people wouldn't know if you didn't know that stat. And I'm guessing right now, a couple months from now, that Tua is going to be one of my highest owned quarterbacks in best ball exposure. I'm all aboard this bounce back. I think he's closer to Joe Burrow than he is to Josh Rosen. Like, people want to write him off so fast. No thanks. I'm all about the Tua bounce back. So we'll see how that goes. Like you said, there are a lot of mouths to feed there. So, are they going to all be consistently good? Parker, Fuller, I don't know. There will probably be weeks where some of them are good, some of them aren't. But in best ball, I think each one of these guys are solid picks at their ADP, especially Tua.
I agree.
Those are the main signings. We are still waiting on a couple of big names. Kenny Golladay mainly is drawing this out. He's reportedly looking for, 18 plus million in his deal. The Giants are suitors. It seems like that deal is going to get done. Don't love that landing spot. Hope he lands somewhere other than New York. There's already, Godius there, Sterling Shepard there. He would obviously step in and be the clear-cut alpha, but that would just hurt my heart with the Godius stuff. But we'll have to see how that develops. We'll talk about that when he officially signs somewhere. Is there anybody I missed here on this list? Anybody you wanna touch on before we get out of here?
Nah, I think we pretty much covered every free agent, impactful free agent, I should say.
Yeah, there will be a couple more signings, and we'll hit on those as they develop. You briefly mentioned the Deshaun Watson. Talk about it, just not right here necessarily. Maybe on the podcast we can get into it a little bit. Maybe as more information comes out. I don't want to just jump in and say stuff that we don't really know about at this point. So we'll hit on that on the podcast this week. But that's all we've got. Make sure you guys check that out. Pod will be out this coming Thursday. You can look at our last one. Like I said, we were joined by one of the best ball players out there, James Brimacombe. That episode is available right now on Apple, SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, Podcast Addict.
Links in the description. You could just
Links
click
in the description. Yup, click it, give it a look. And that's going to be it. We'll talk to you guys soon.